Few words to say on this big summit or meeting between Xi Jinping and Joe Biden. Biden has got the headlines for saying basically that yes, Xi Jinping is a dictator. He was asked directly the question, and he said yes, he is, in the sense that he is leader of a communist country. I would have actually elaborated even more because Xi Jinping, more than any other Chinese leader since Mao Zedong, has had a personal power. Of course, China, has had a tantrum about this. They don't like the truth being told. They never like the truth being told. But Biden's right. He's absolutely right. But also gets into the realm of how challenging and complex relations between the world's two superpowers are. And I think at this point, it's not a case of China is a near superpower. I think we may as well say it's a superpower. Um, Russia, on the other hand, has been greatly weakened, I think, since the disastrous decision to invade Ukraine. Um, but the important thing to know about Xi Jinping is it's not just the fact that he is the leader of a communist country. It's the fact that he, like I say, has had that personal power attributed to him much more than any other Chinese leader, much more than Hu Jintao or the late Jiang Zemin. In fact, recently, popular Chinese premier Li Keqiang passed away, and there was some censorship of public mourning on his funeral. Now, that's interesting. He was actually premier under Xi Jinping, so he's associated with the Xi era, the first premier, I understand. But China is very cagey about sentiments for former leaders because it puts a reflection on the current leader. Um, there was one video I've just seen that showed an elderly couple from Iowa, and I guess they'd be in their 80s now, but they knew Xi Jinping as a young man back in the mid-1980s, 1985 to be specific, the year I was born, when he visited Iowa. I believe it was part of a scholarship. He was very, very low ranking at that time. I think he was a low-level party official, and he visited a pig farm. It was like for agriculture around pigs, and that's apparently, there was a sentimental piece on Inside Edition about how they met Xi Jinping and they're lifelong friends, and it was all sentimental and nice. I'm thinking, yeah, that's fine, but none of this changes the fact he is a brutal dictator. Um, there were some things that I guess would have to be seen as positive from the meeting. The meeting was in San Francisco, incidentally, not in Washington, D.C. I think that was chosen for Silicon Valley. Big figures of that industry, Elon Musk, Tim Cook were also in attendance, but unusual location for a summit. Usually summits are in capital cities, so San Francisco on this occasion. Um, but there was diplomatic language from both leaders. That's typical. Xi Jinping is never going to come out with the nationalistic rants he would make to a domestic audience. It was all about, goodwill and coordination in China and America working together and understanding and, all good diplomatic language. But his track record says something different. His track record is one of aggressive nationalism. But like I say, some good things came out of it. Increased working together on climate issues, control of fentanyl. There was other areas where there was some agreement, and the very fact that they're talking is probably important. You know, I am very, very critical of Western leaders who are not sufficiently tough with China, and I'll come back to what I mean about that. But I've never said that there should be absolutely no communication with China. I don't think that's realistic. I don't think it can be done. And it could actually make things worse when you consider the size of the Chinese economy and how integrated that now is to the global situation. Not to mention, it's a major military power. It's a major country. It's not actually the power of China is not unlimited. That's sometimes a mistake I think the West makes. This idea that it's this big, unstoppable giant that just cannot be. It actually does have some flaws. There are internal things going on in China that, of course, Chinese state media cover up, but there are some weaknesses there. The aging population, for example, will be a serious challenge for the CCP. There's a lot of other factors, and there is some domestic unease. Not big enough at this point for sort of a revolution, but it's there. It is there, and Xi Jinping knows he can't be complacent. Um, I've long argued that ideological communism is a complete and utter failure, and I think the CCP know themselves that no longer is sells. So what they've been doing in modern times, I would say the last few decades, is selling hyper-nationalism. And you have a situation where Chinese citizens who don't necessarily like the CCP on the domestic front, nevertheless will fiercely defend it in international terms, because nationalism is like a religion in China. It's very intense and very strong. And you see this with any major dispute, whether it be in the South China Sea, whether it be diplomatic disputes with Western countries. It's there, you know. Wherever you have Chinese leaders coming out with their aggressive rhetoric, it's soon followed by netizens, backing it up with their own nationalism. Um, some of this is encouraged by the Chinese state, but some of it is actually, it's, I think, part of the culture. And I could say that confidently because I personally seen it and experienced it. Um, so the first thing to say is Biden is absolutely right to call Xi Jinping a dictator. There's been some talk of the fact that Secretary of State Blinken winced when Biden said this. Well, if Blinken is wincing because he thinks it's undiplomatic, well, that's disappointing. I hold Blinken in quite high regard. I think he's smart. I think he's a good Secretary of State. But if he's taking this view that Biden shouldn't say that, sometimes Biden makes gaffes. Sometimes he puts his foot in it. On this occasion, he's spot on, and he's just telling the truth. Xi Jinping is a dictator. And when history is written, some will dismiss Biden as this old, older president who's often makes gaffes, but actually, this might show a degree of assertiveness whereby he can talk to Xi Jinping while saying that. And although Beijing's going to protest, I don't think it will unnecessarily damage the talks that were made. Xi Jinping himself knows he's a dictator. He himself will probably not deny it, but his state mouthpieces will. The truth has to be told, and having a communication line with China, the same applies to this country, does not mean we have to pander to their tune. What I think would be unforgivable is for Western leaders to continue to take a path of kind of fear, of basically pandering to Chinese threats. I think that would be a grave mistake. In Britain, of course, David Cameron is the new Foreign Secretary. Now, David Cameron, as Premier, presided over the so-called Anglo-British Golden Relations, or excuse me, Sino-Anglo Golden Relations. That now is seen historically as naive at best. It was a policy with good intentions, but good intentions in politics are often lead to big, big problems. And in this case, I feel it led to China being emboldened that they could push this country around. We have a situation now where British MPs on the Foreign Affairs Select Committee have faced threats from so-called wolf warrior diplomats. Rishi Sunak needs to be tough. David Cameron needs to be tough. They cannot take this approach of caution. Cameron's predecessor, James Cleverly, took the same approach. And yes, they'll say we condemn the human rights situation in Xinjiang and we don't tolerate China threatening our sovereignty and all the rest of it, but they have to prove it. They have to say these things very publicly, and they have to summon the Chinese ambassador whenever there is evidence that this is happening. We have to send a message to Beijing, yes, we'll work with you, but we're not going to tolerate this ultra-nationalistic, aggressive behaviour, because I think China's emboldened by it. And if we look at Xi Jinping's record, I'm going to touch on this briefly because my space is limited. Mass incarceration of Uyghurs, ever-increasing crackdown across China, threatening Australia for calling for an independent COVID inquiry, I believe misleading the world on COVID, leading to millions of deaths. um, and increased maritime expansion as well in the South China Sea, threatening Vietnam, the Philippines, and other neighbouring countries. This is Xi Jinping's record. And yeah, they can point to economic growth and the Belt and Road Initiative and so on, but actually, China's economic growth has slowed down. And, China could be the richest country in the world. It wouldn't justify the things it's doing. Um, so, like I say, I think the nationalism thing cannot be underestimated. I think that is one of the tools of aggression that the Chinese state uses. Now, I'm no xenophobe. I would much rather have good relations with China, but I believe that so long as a dictator like Xi Jinping is in power, so long as that regime is in power, it will be a challenge. So Western leaders have to work with China where necessary, like what Biden's doing on climate change and fentanyl and so on, but also not shy away from calling China out and not tolerating their threats. If they insult us, if they threaten us, I'm not saying we resort in kind, but we have to aggressively counter that. What I mean is call it out, summon the Chinese ambassador to explain himself, lodge a formal complaint. These are tactics, these are moves that can be used and should be used, not this kind of, well, we will not. I feel there's too much caution from Western leaders, especially in this country, and I'm sick of it. I think it's a big mistake. Um, that AI summit that Rishi Sunak held recently, again, probably China had to come. I accept that if it's just ignored, that probably will cause bigger problems.